Greetings. It's wonderful to have you here again, in a place where self-care turns into a pleasure. Let's talk frankly today, without embellishments, but with great warmth and understanding. You know, approaching the mark of 80, 85, or perhaps you've already crossed this threshold. It's a special time, a time of wisdom, accumulated experience, but also, let's be honest, a time of confronting some, let's call them, harsh truths of life. This doesn't mean life is ending or losing its color, not at all. But our body, our familiar world, they are changing. Why does this happen? Well, imagine our body as an amazing, complex mechanism that has worked tirelessly for decades. Naturally, over time, some parts wear out, some processes slow down. It's no one's fault, it's just life. And sometimes, unconsciously, we worsen these changes ourselves. Habits that have been with us for half our lives suddenly start working against us. For example, the stubborn desire to do everything like before, even when the body is asking for mercy. That's like trying to run a marathon on flat tires, or shutting oneself within four walls when it becomes harder to leave the house. That's like drawing the curtains yourself on a sunny day, depriving yourself of light. But I'm not here to scare you, quite the opposite. I want to promise you that by understanding and accepting these changes, we can find ways not just to cope, but to live well, with dignity, and even with a new zest for life. My advice will be simple, accessible, based on the experiences of people just like you. Please, stay with me until the end of this conversation, and I believe together we will find the keys to a calmer and brighter everyday life. The first reality we often face is that our body isn't what it was at 50 or even 70. There's less energy, movement is harder, and aches appear where there were none before. And what do we often do? We either try to ignore the body's signals, acting the old way, pushing through it, or, conversely, we give up and stop moving altogether. Both paths lead to disappointment and worsening conditions. Instead, I would suggest replacing the all-or-nothing habit with the principle of small steps, but regularly. Let me tell you about Arthur. Arthur was 82 when I met him. All his life, he adored long walks in the park, capable of covering miles. But arthritis in his knees and general weakness made these walks almost impossible. Oh, how distressed he was. He felt helpless, angry. "I'm like an old car rusting in the garage," he'd say bitterly. At first, he tried to walk as before, overcoming the pain. The result? He nearly fell a couple of times, the pain intensified, and he stopped leaving the house entirely, sinking into despair. He reminisced about his youth, compared his former self to his current state, and this comparison was so painful that he just sat by the window, watching the world that, he felt, was passing him by. But then, on his doctor's advice and with his daughter's support, he decided to try a different approach. Instead of mourning the lost miles, he started small, 10 minutes of walking in the small garden by his house. Initially, it felt humiliating. What kind of walk is this? It's laughable. But he forced himself. He took the elegant cane his daughter had given him for Christmas. He used to hide it, embarrassed. And you know what? Gradually, he started enjoying it. He began noticing things he hadn't paid attention to before, how the lilac buds were opening, how ants bustled about purposefully, how the sky changed color. His cane transformed from a symbol of infirmity into a faithful companion. Physiologically, even these short walks improved his circulation, slightly strengthened his leg muscles, and reduced joint stiffness. And psychologically, it was a real salvation. He regained a sense of control, a small daily achievement. He stopped comparing himself to the young Arthur and started appreciating the Arthur of today. After all, trying to live by old standards is like trying to fit a size 12 foot into a size 6 shoe, uncomfortable and pointless. But finding your own new comfortable rhythm, that's like finding the perfect pair of shoes in your size in which you can walk, maybe not as fast, but confidently and with pleasure. Those 10 minutes in the garden became more important to him than the previous miles because they were his, real, available now. His mood improved, the aches from immobility lessened, and a feeling of connection with life reappeared. So, if you feel your strength isn't what it used to be, don't scold yourself and don't give up. Try to find your measure of movement. Let it be exercises sitting in a chair, a few laps around the room, or a leisurely walk to the mailbox. The main thing is to do it with self-care, not forcing yourself. Find your comfortable pace, and you'll see how your body responds with gratitude. Hand in hand with physical changes often come shifts in how our minds work. The second reality that can be frightening is changes in our memory function, forgetting names, dates, where you put the keys, and the first instinct is panic. Is it starting? Am I losing my mind? We start scolding ourselves, fearing we'll look foolish, avoiding communication. This anxiety itself worsens cognitive functions. Therefore, the next piece of advice is replace self-criticism and fear with acceptance and the use of simple aids. I want to share Eleanor's story. She was 85, an incredibly clear mind, a wonderful storyteller, but in recent years, she began noticing it was increasingly difficult to recall recent events or the names of new acquaintances. She was horrified. I've always been proud of my memory, and now, what will the children say? What will my friends think? She shared tearfully. She started avoiding phone calls, afraid of freezing up mid-conversation, and stopped going to her book club meetings because she couldn't remember plot details. Her world began to shrink, and her anxiety grew like a snowball. It seemed to her that admitting the problem meant signing off on her own inadequacy. But her granddaughter, a very tactful young woman, suggested she shouldn't fight windmills, but rather make friends with the situation. Together, they bought a beautiful large calendar with big numbers, where Eleanor began writing down all important appointments and birthdays. They put a magnetic board on the fridge for notes. Next to the phone, they placed a notepad for names and numbers. At first, Eleanor felt awkward, as if using crutches for the mind. But gradually, she realized it wasn't weakness, but wisdom. It's like wearing glasses when your vision declines. It's not shameful, it's sensible. Physiologically, reducing stress and anxiety levels already improves brain function, and using external prompts frees the mind from having to hold on to a mass of small details. Psychologically, Eleanor felt immense relief. The fear receded. She started calling her friends again, confidently arranging meetings. Moreover, she discovered that her long-term memory remained excellent. She began to talk more about the past, share her wisdom, and her stories evoked admiration. She realized her brain wasn't an old, broken computer, but a vast library filled with priceless books. Yes, perhaps the card catalog was a bit faulty, but the books themselves were still there. Using notes and a calendar was like hiring a competent librarian to help quickly find the right shelf. And anxiety and self-criticism were like noise in the reading room, making it hard to concentrate. Once the noise subsided, it became clear how much value was stored in this library. She felt competent, interesting, and needed again. Therefore, if you notice your memory is faltering, please don't blame yourself. This is a normal part of the process. Be kind to your mind. Get a beautiful notebook. Use your phone for reminders. Don't hesitate to ask again. These are not signs of decline, but tools for a comfortable life. What small helper could make your life easier starting today? Perhaps one of the most difficult realities of this life stage, the third harsh truth, is the series of losses. Spouses, friends, loved ones pass away. The familiar way of life changes, and grief can become all-consuming, coloring everything in dark tones. Often, we either try to be strong and suppress the pain, or we immerse ourselves in it completely, losing touch with the present. Here, it's important to replace suppression, or total immersion, in grief with gentle processing, and finding ways to honor the memory without destroying yourself. Margaret was 88 when her husband John, with whom she had lived soul to soul for over 60 years, passed away. Her world collapsed. She felt lost, devastated. "Half of me died with him," she whispered. The house was full of his things, his scent, his presence absence. Every corner reminded her of him and caused unbearable pain. Friends and children tried to comfort her, invited her over, but she refused. It seemed no one could understand the depth of her loss, and their attempts to cheer her up only irritated her. She sat in John's armchair, looking through old photographs, and cried. Grief was like a heavy, impenetrable blanket, covering her head to toe. She was afraid that if she let the tears flow, she would simply drown in them. Or conversely, she feared that if she started living again, going to the store, meeting friends, it would be a betrayal of John's memory. This internal conflict exhausted her. But one day, Her granddaughter brought her a simple journal and said, "Grandma, maybe you could try writing letters to John. Tell him about your day, your feelings." Margaret initially dismissed it, but then decided to try, and it became her salvation. She poured out all her pain, longing, and tenderness onto the paper. She didn't suppress the grief, but gave it an outlet, a controlled one. Gradually, she was able to sort through some of John's belongings, keeping the most precious mementos: his favorite cup, a sweater, his stamp collection. She set up a small memory corner in the living room with his photos and favorite trinkets. It wasn't a place of mourning, but a place of gentle sadness and gratitude for the years lived together. She allowed herself to grieve, for instance, remembering him every evening before sleep and crying if she felt like it. But she also began to allow herself small joys, having tea on the balcony, listening to her favorite music. Physiologically, expressing emotions, even painful ones, reduces the level of stress hormones that are destructive to the body. Psychologically, Margaret found a way to integrate the loss into her life, rather than being consumed by it. She realized that grief isn't a black hole meant to swallow her whole. It's more like a deep river that has become part of the landscape of her soul. One can learn to live on its bank, honor its waters, but not plunge headfirst into them. Her memory corner became like a quiet harbor, a place she could enter, stay a while, and then return to life. She hadn't forgotten John. On the contrary, his memory became a bright part of her present. If you are experiencing loss, know that your grief is real and has a right to exist. Don't blame yourself for tears or for moments when you suddenly feel lighter. Allow yourself to experience this feeling gently. Find your own way to honor the memory of those who have passed, whether it's talking to a photograph, keeping a journal, or planting a flower in their honor. Remember, keeping love in your heart doesn't mean giving up on life. How can you gently carry the memory of your loved ones while continuing your own journey? This feeling of losing loved ones, unfortunately, can also lead to another difficult reality familiar to many at this age: a growing sense of loneliness. Friends pass away, children and grandchildren are busy with their own lives, physical limitations make leaving the house difficult, the world seems to shrink, and it feels like you're left alone at an empty station after all the trains have departed. The habit that exacerbates this state is passively waiting for someone to come, call, notice, and feeling offended if it doesn't happen. Instead, try replacing passive waiting with small, manageable steps towards contact. Rethink what connection means. Meet George. At 86, he was once the life of the party, his house always full of guests. But after his wife's death and a stroke that limited his mobility, he found himself practically confined to his apartment. The phone remained silent for weeks. His children called, but not as often as he would have liked. They had their own concerns. George felt terribly lonely, unneeded, forgotten. "I'm like an old wardrobe, pushed into a far corner and forgotten," he complained to the rare visitor, a social worker. He was convinced nobody cared about him and stopped calling anyone himself so as not to impose. He just sat and watched television, which became his only companion. This state was agonizing. He felt resentment, bitterness, apathy. It seemed to him that an active social life was something from the irretrievably lost past. But the social worker, seeing his condition, proposed a tiny experiment. "George," he said, "try making just one phone call a day. To anyone, a niece, an old colleague, a neighbor, just to ask how they are. 5 minutes, no more." George grumbled, but agreed to try. The first call was awkward, but the person on the other end was happy to hear from him. The second was easier. Gradually, it became a habit. He started hearing news, sharing his thoughts. It turned out people were glad to hear from him. Then, with his grandson's help, he mastered a simple video call program and started seeing his great-grandchildren, who lived in another city, once a week. He began waving to neighbors from his window when they passed by. Physiologically, even brief social contacts stimulate the production of happiness hormones and reduce stress levels. Psychologically, George stopped feeling invisible. He realized that connection isn't necessarily noisy gatherings. It can be a short phone call, a smile to a neighbor, a video call with family. Loneliness is like a cold draft under the door, and every small contact is like a piece of warm fabric you use to plug the gap. The home of your soul becomes cozier. He understood that waiting for someone to guess your loneliness and come to the rescue is a path to nowhere. But reaching out yourself, even for a brief greeting, that's like opening a window to a sunbeam. He felt like part of the world again, not thrown to the wayside. If you feel lonely, please don't lock yourself away in this feeling. Try to take one small step towards someone. Call an old friend, send a short message to your grandchildren, smile at the cashier in the store. Even the most insignificant contact can warm the soul, both yours and the other person's. Who is that person you could gift a minute of your attention to today? And just as we learn to rebuild connections with the world, we may encounter another delicate truth that can be very difficult to accept, especially for those used to doing everything themselves. This is the increasing need for assistance from others. It becomes difficult to drive, cook, clean, sometimes even dress. And this is perceived as a loss of independence, as humiliation, as a sign that you are becoming a burden. The usual reaction is to resist help with all your might, getting angry at yourself and those trying to help. But what if you tried replacing resistance and shame with the wise acceptance of help and learning how to organize it properly? Betty, 84, had always been an incredibly independent woman. She managed her household, drove her car, handled her finances herself. But after a bad fall and a hip fracture, she found herself dependent on her daughter's help for many daily tasks. Oh, how she hated it. "I feel like a child. I can't even go to the store myself," she complained to me. She constantly criticized her daughter for how she cleaned or cooked. "You don't salt it right, you put that in the wrong place." Refused offers of help, and then got upset that she couldn't do anything herself. This created immense tension between them. Betty felt humiliated, helpless, angry at her weakness, and at her daughter, who, she felt, only emphasized her frailty. It seemed to her that accepting help meant finally giving up, admitting defeat. But one day, after another conflict, her daughter sat down beside her and calmly said, "Mom, I want to help you, but I don't know the best way. How about you decide what I should do and when? Make a grocery list, tell me what time is convenient for you for me to come clean." And this conversation was a turning point. Betty realized she could manage the help, not just passively receive it. She started making detailed lists, giving clear instructions. She focused on what she could do herself, like sorting mail, planning menus, making phone calls. She learned to say thank you instead of criticizing. Physiologically, the reduction in conflict and stress had a positive effect on her well-being and even her recovery speed. Psychologically, Betty felt that respect and control over the situation had returned to her, albeit within new boundaries. She understood that asking for and accepting help is not weakness, but a manifestation of wisdom and self-care. It's like being an experienced ship captain. If a storm, illness, age, damages the sails, a wise captain won't try to mend them alone in a gale, risking the entire vessel. They will accept help from other crew members or even a rescue tugboat to bring the ship safely to harbor. Pride that prevents accepting help is like a heavy, unnecessary anchor pulling you down. And gratitude and the ability to delegate are like properly set sails that help move forward even in a light wind. Her relationship with her daughter improved. Betty became calmer and felt much more dignified. If you find it difficult to manage certain tasks, please don't see it as a personal defeat. Think of accepting help as a strategic decision by a wise person who conserves their energy for more important things, for connection, for joy, for life. Talk to your loved ones about exactly what help you need and how you would like to receive it. Remember, allowing someone to help you is an act of trust and love, not weakness. In what area of life could you accept support with a light heart? And finally, amidst all these adaptations to new physical, social, and emotional realities, a deeper question may arise, the sixth truth of our conversation. Especially after retirement and the change in familiar roles, parent of adult children, active worker, the thought might occur, what am I here for now? What is the meaning of my life? A feeling of uselessness, emptiness can emerge. Days seem monotonous and meaningless. The habit that fuels this state is constantly comparing oneself to the past, living in memories of former achievements and roles, devaluing the present. Here, it's important to shift the focus from who you were to who you are now, and find meaning and joy in small things, in the present moment. David, 87, a former design engineer, spent his life solving complex problems, building bridges, managing projects. After retiring and then passing the 80-year milestone, he felt empty. His children were grown, grandchildren too. Work was in the past. "I'm just living out my days," he said wistfully. Days blurred into one: television, lunch, sleep. He often recalled his projects, his successes, and this only intensified the feeling of worthlessness in his current existence. It seemed to him that if he wasn't doing something big and important, his life lacked meaning. He felt apathy, mild depression, irritation at the hustle and bustle around him, which seemed pointless. His wife worried, seeing him fade. But one day, their great-granddaughter, a little girl about 5, asked him to read her a story via video call. David initially demurred. "I'm old, my voice is creaky," but then agreed, and a miracle happened. Seeing the delight in the child's eyes, hearing her laughter, he felt a long-forgotten warmth in his chest. It became their little ritual. Then he noticed a bird feeder outside his window and started watching them, even keeping a notebook where he recorded which birds visited. A volunteer from the local historical society started visiting him to record his memories of the town. It turned out his stories were priceless. He began paying more attention to simple things, brewing his morning coffee with pleasure using a special recipe, carefully arranging tools in his desk drawer. Physiologically, any meaningful activity, even the simplest, stimulates the brain, improves mood, and combats depression. Psychologically, David found new sources of meaning and satisfaction. He realized that the value of life isn't measured solely by the scale of achievements. Life isn't just about building bridges across rivers, but also about building little bridges to the hearts of loved ones. Meaning isn't a job title or rank. It's the light you bring to the present day, even if it's just a smile for your great-granddaughter or breadcrumbs for a chickadee. The practice of gratitude for small things, for a sunbeam, for tasty tea, for a friend's call, is like wiping a fogged-up window to see the beauty that was always there. David stopped feeling like a former engineer. He became simply David, a wise old man, a grandfather, a storyteller, an observer, a person who found his quiet joy in the present. Your life has immense value right now, just as it is. Your wisdom, your experience, your unique story. This is a treasure. Try to find small joys and meanings in each day. What can you do today that will bring you satisfaction or warm someone's heart? Perhaps share a memory. Listen to favorite music. Simply sit by the window and observe life? Your presence in this world is important. So, these are some of the realities we encounter in this wise age. Yes, they can be challenging, sometimes even harsh. But, as you've understood from our stories, it's not so much about these truths themselves as it is about our attitude towards them. You have an immense life journey behind you. You've seen, experienced, and overcome so much. Your wisdom and experience are your strength. You have every right to well-being, respect, and joy at any age. Don't be afraid to change, adapt, ask for help, and find new sources of light in your life. Remember, you are not alone in your experiences, and you always have a choice: how to respond to the challenges of time. May each of your days be filled not with struggle, but with acceptance, not with despondency, but with quiet joy, not with regret for the past, but with the value of the present. Believe in yourself, in your inner strength, and in the fact that life can be kind to you even after 80. Take care of yourselves, and until we meet again,